What if the very first empire in human history didn't just rise from greatness, but also carried within it the seeds of its own destruction? Imagine a time when the world was not ruled by powerful nations, but by scattered city-states, small, independent centers of life surrounded by uncertainty. Each city had its own ruler, its own army, and its own ambitions. Power was local, fragile, and constantly challenged. There was no concept of a unified world, no vision of a single authority stretching across vast lands. And then everything changed. A man emerged from obscurity and redefined what power meant forever. His name was Sargon of Akkad, and his story is not just about conquest, it's about the birth of an idea that would shape human civilization for thousands of years. And in the ancient region of Mesopotamia, cities like Uruk, Ur, and Lagash thrived independently. They traded goods, built temples, and developed early systems of governance. But they also fought constantly. Wars were frequent, alliances were temporary, and peace was fragile. No one had ever imagined uniting all these cities under one rule, but Sargon did. According to ancient legends, Sargon's life began in mystery. Some stories claim he was born in secret, placed in a basket, and set adrift on a river, only to be found and raised by a humble gardener. Whether this is myth or truth, it reflects something important. Sargon was seen as a man destined for greatness. He began his rise not as a king, but as a servant, working his way up through determination, intelligence, and ambition. But unlike others, Sargon didn't just want to rule a city, he wanted to rule everything. Through a series of brilliant and relentless military campaigns, he conquered one city after another, but his true genius was not in destruction, it was in control. Instead of wiping out the cities he defeated, he absorbed them into a larger system. He placed loyal governors in charge, ensured the flow of resources, and created one of the earliest known administrative networks. This was something the world had never seen before. The Akkadian Empire was born. Stretching across vast territories, it connected diverse cultures, languages, and economies under one centralized authority. Trade routes expanded, communication improved, and for the first time, a large region experienced a form of political unity. It was not just an empire, it was a revolution in how humans organized power. Sargon had done the impossible. But building an empire is one thing, keeping it alive is something else entirely. As the empire expanded, so did its challenges. The lands Sargon controlled were not empty. They were filled with people who had their own traditions, beliefs, and loyalties. Maintaining control over such diversity required constant effort. Rebellions were always a threat. Communication across long distances was slow, and the larger the empire grew, the harder it became to manage. Sargon understood this, and he ruled with a mix of strength and strategy. He used military force to crush opposition, but he also used symbolism and religion to legitimize his authority. He presented himself as a ruler chosen by the gods, of creating a sense of unity among his people. But even the strongest rulers cannot escape time. After Sargon's death, the empire passed to his successors. For a while it continued to thrive. Among these rulers, one name stands out: Naram-Sin. Under his leadership, the empire reached its peak. Territories expanded further, victories were celebrated, and the empire appeared stronger than ever. But Naram-Sin made a decision that would change everything. He declared himself a god. This was more than a political move. It was a transformation of how power was perceived. By elevating himself to divine status, Naram-Sin removed the boundary between ruler and deity. While this strengthened his authority in the short term, it also created a dangerous expectation, because a god cannot fail. And when failure comes, it shakes everything. Beneath the surface of success, cracks were beginning to form. Distant regions became harder to control. Local leaders began to resist. Rebellions grew more frequent. The administrative system, once innovative, struggled under the weight of expansion. Then came something even more devastating, something no empire could control. Nature turned against them. Historians believe that during the later period of the Akkadian Empire, the region experienced severe environmental changes, including prolonged drought. Crops failed, food shortages spread, and famine began to weaken the population. This was not just a temporary crisis, it was a slow collapse of the very foundation that supported the empire. When people cannot eat, they do not obey. Cities that once followed the empire began to rebel. Trade routes collapsed, stability disappeared, and just when the empire was at its weakest, The final blow arrived. The Gutians, a group from the surrounding mountains, invaded the weakened lands. They did not face a united empire. They faced a fractured, exhausted system already on the verge of collapse. The fall of the Akkadian Empire was not a single dramatic moment. It was a chain reaction: internal rebellion, environmental disaster, external invasion. Together, they brought down the first empire in human history. Cities were abandoned, power fragmented. The unity Sargon had created dissolved back into chaos. But here's what makes this story truly powerful. The empire may have fallen, but its idea did not. Sargon's vision of centralized rule, organized administration, and large-scale control became the blueprint for every empire that followed. The Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persians, all built upon the foundation he created. Even thousands of years later, the concept of empire continues to shape the modern world. In many ways, we are still living in the shadow of Akkad, and if you look closely, you'll notice something else. The pattern repeats. Empires rise through ambition and strength. They expand through conquest and control. They reach a peak of power and influence, and then, slowly or suddenly, they fall. The reasons may change: war, economics, climate, politics, but the cycle remains the same. And which raises a powerful question. Are empires destined to fall, or do they fall because they ignore the lessons of the past? The story of Sargon of Akkad is not just a story of success, it's a warning, a reminder that power, no matter how great, is never permanent, that every system, no matter how strong, can break under pressure. Because true greatness is not just about building something powerful, it's about sustaining it in the face of time, change, and uncertainty. And history shows us, again and again, how difficult that truly is. If you found this story powerful and want to explore more hidden truths about ancient civilizations, lost empires, and the forces that shape our world, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because history is not just something that happened long ago, it's a mirror. And if we don't learn from it, we might be watching the same story unfold all over again.